I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when I saw the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. My hands shook so badly I had to set the stick down on the bathroom counter to keep it from sliding off. For a moment, I just stared, trying to convince myself that my eyes were deceiving me. But there it was. Undeniable, impossible to ignore. I was pregnant. A wave of emotions crashed over me at once. Joy, disbelief, terror, and an almost frantic hope that Daniel would be happy too. We had talked about starting a family someday, but someday had always felt so far away. And now it was here faster than I had expected. More real than anything I had imagined. I took a deep breath and ran my hands over my stomach, smiling weakly at the small miracle growing inside me. "Okay, Lily," I whispered, trying to steady myself. "You've got this. Just tell him." I rehearsed it over and over, imagining the excitement in his eyes. The way he would wrap me in his arms and tell me everything was going to be okay. My heart ached with anticipation, and yet a tiny knot of fear lingered in my chest. Daniel could be unpredictable sometimes, and I had learned to temper my expectations, to brace for moods that could shift without warning. Still, hope was stubborn, and I clung to it like a lifeline. When I finally found him in the living room, sprawled on the couch with a half-empty beer and a football game muted on the TV. My hands were clammy and my stomach fluttered nervously. "Daniel," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady, I have something to tell you." He glanced at me, raising an eyebrow, a smirk tugging at his lips as if he already knew this was going to be dramatic. "What is it?" he asked casually, not looking away from the screen. I felt my chest tighten and swallowed hard. "I'm pregnant," I said, holding his gaze, my words trembling slightly. I expected surprise, joy, maybe even disbelief. I expected him to reach for me, to wrap me in his arms, to whisper some kind of sweet reassurance. But what I got instead was a flash of something I didn't recognize. Something sharp and angry that pierced through the anticipation like a blade. His eyes narrowed, and for a split second, the room seemed to grow smaller, darker, and suffocating. Then his hand was there, striking my face with a force that sent me reeling backward, hitting the edge of the couch. Pain radiated through my cheek, sharp and fiery. But it was nothing compared to the shock and disbelief that froze my entire body. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't process what had just happened. My hand flew to my cheek, but it was useless. I could still feel the sting, the red heat blooming across my skin. You what?" His voice was low, cold, laced with disbelief and anger. "You think you can just do this? Bring a baby into this mess?" I stared at him, trying to find the man I thought I knew behind the furious eyes, but there was nothing familiar there. My voice, when it finally came, was small, fragile, almost a whisper. "Daniel, it's our child. I thought we wanted this. I thought you wanted this." He cut me off, his words snapping like whips. "Do you even know what you're saying? You're talking about ruining our lives, Lily. You don't even know what this means." I shook my head, stepping back instinctively, tears stinging my eyes, heart hammering painfully in my chest. I didn't mean to upset you," I said softly. "I just thought you thought," he interrupted again, voice rising. "You just thought, this isn't about what you think. Do you have any idea what you're doing?" His face was a storm of anger, the same fury I had seen flare in arguments before. But this time it was more terrifying because it had landed on me physically. I felt a tremor of fear crawl through my spine, cold and insidious. And my stomach clenched as my mind struggled to comprehend the reality of the man I had married, the man I had trusted. I sank onto the couch, trembling, trying to make sense of it all. I'm sorry, Daniel. I didn't mean to upset you. I wanted to share something happy." My words were fragile, tentative, and entirely He stalked toward me, and I flinched, shrinking back instinctively, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. His hands were balled into fists, his jaw tight, and the man I had once loved and trusted seemed gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. "I can't believe this," he muttered under his breath, pacing back and forth. "I can't believe this is happening. We're not ready for this. It's too much." His words were frantic, angry, and completely devoid of the affection I had once relied on. I felt my chest tighten even more, tears spilling freely now, hot and fast, streaking down my cheeks. I tried to speak again, to reach him, to explain, but every word caught in my throat, choked by the fear and shock that had routed me to the spot. I realized, in that moment, with a clarity that was terrifying, that the person sitting in front of me, the man I had married, the one I had believed would protect me, support me, love me unconditionally, could hurt me. Physically, emotionally, in ways I had never imagined possible. My heart felt like it was breaking in slow, jagged pieces, and I couldn't decide whether I wanted to run, scream, or collapse entirely. My stomach, tiny and innocent, fluttered in fear, and I pressed my hands against it instinctively, as if I could shield our child from the storm I had never expected to face. "Lily, stop crying," he said abruptly, almost sharply, though the anger in his voice had dulled into something colder, something calculating. "You're overreacting. You're being ridiculous." The words were meant to control, to minimize, to erase the hurt he had caused, but all they did was magnify it. I shook my head slowly, looking at him with disbelief, anger, and hurt colliding into one impossible weight. "I'm not overreacting," I said firmly, voice quivering but resolute. You hit me. How can you say I'm overreacting?" His expression hardened, his eyes a mixture of guilt and irritation. He muttered something about stress and responsibility, but his words felt hollow, meaningless, and entirely insufficient against the raw, searing pain of what had just happened. I realized then that my life, my body, my child, everything I had imagined sharing with him was no longer safe in his hands. The man I had trusted could strike me when he was angry. The man I had loved could inflict fear in the moment, meant to be filled with joy. And for the first time, a terrifying, bitter clarity settled over me. Everything had changed. I sat there for what felt like hours, trembling, tears soaking my shirt, staring at the floor. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the muted TV. But inside my mind, the storm raged on: fear, confusion, heartbreak, and an unshakable sense of betrayal. I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to move forward, didn't know if our marriage could survive this. I only knew that I had to protect myself, and now, more than ever, I had to protect the tiny life growing inside me. I pressed my hands to my stomach again, whispering softly, "I'll keep you safe. I promise. I don't know how yet, but I will." The day after Daniel hit me, I woke up stiff and sore, the bruise on my cheek throbbing with a persistent ache. I didn't want to get out of bed, didn't want to face the reality of our apartment, the man who had hurt me, or the tiny life growing inside me that depended entirely on my strength. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember a time when Daniel had been gentle, when he had smiled at me, when I had believed in the life we were building. Those memories felt distant now, almost unreal, a cruel contrast to the violent reality I had woken up to. I felt hollow, shaken, and terribly alone, even though I could hear his quiet breathing in the next room. When he came into the bedroom, acting as if nothing had happened, my stomach knotted tighter. "Lily," he said cautiously, his voice softer now. "I didn't mean it like that. I don't know. I lost control. I'm sorry." I shook my head, unable to trust his words, my heart racing with anger and fear. "Sorry doesn't erase this," I said quietly, my voice trembling with both hurt and disbelief. "You hit me, Daniel. You slapped me. That's not something I can just forget." He paused, guilt flickering across his face for a brief moment before his defenses rose again. "You're overreacting. I just reacted poorly. Stress hormones. I don't know. Can we just not make this worse?" His attempt to minimize the incident made the pit in my stomach grow, and I realized that what I was dealing with wasn't just anger. It was a pattern I had never fully acknowledged. I reached out to my sister Hannah that afternoon. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number, tears pricking my eyes with every ring. "Hannah, something happened," I said, voice cracking. I couldn't form the words fast enough, couldn't explain the wave of fear, disbelief, and shame that had engulfed me. "Daniel, he hit me. When I told him I was pregnant, he slapped me." The silence on the other end was long, but I knew she was listening, that she understood the gravity of what I had just said. "Lily," she finally whispered, her voice thick with emotion, You're safe now, right? You're okay?" I felt my chest tighten at the concern in her tone. "I'm here, I'm alive, but I don't know what to do. Hannah, I don't know if I can stay. I can't believe he did that. I can't believe he's capable of that." I swallowed hard, trying to hold myself together, but the tears came anyway. Hot and unstoppable. Hannah insisted I come to her apartment immediately, and I didn't hesitate, packing a small bag with essentials, my prenatal vitamins, and a few sentimental items. I left our apartment without a word, the silence of the space behind me amplifying the weight of what had happened. On the subway ride to her place, I felt every inch of my body tense, my mind racing through what-ifs, warnings, and memories of Daniel's unpredictable temper. I pressed my hands to my stomach, whispering softly, "I'll keep you safe. I promise. We'll get through this together." When I arrived, Hannah enveloped me in a tight hug, her arms a shield against the world. "You're safe now," she murmured, and for the first time since Daniel struck me, I felt a flicker of relief. I let myself cry, lean into her comfort, and release some of the tension I had been holding in my chest. We spent hours talking, recounting everything that had happened, her listening patiently as I stumbled through the story, emotions raw and unfiltered. She didn't scold me for staying, didn't tell me I should have seen the warning signs earlier. She simply affirmed that I was brave for recognizing the danger and reaching out. Over the next few days, I stayed with Hannah, trying to process the storm of emotions that raged inside me. Fear still lurked in the corners of my mind, warning me that Daniel might come after me, that he might try to manipulate or intimidate me. Guilt gnawed at me. Too guilt for the life growing inside me, for the child who would never know a calm, safe beginning in the house we had once shared. But alongside fear and guilt, there was a small, stubborn ember of determination, a whisper of strength telling me that I could protect myself and my baby, that I deserved safety, love, and respect. I began to reflect on our marriage, the moments I had overlooked, dismissed, or excused. The way Daniel's temper flared over minor inconveniences, the way he had belittled me in private or made subtle threats that I had ignored, the controlling tendencies I had rationalized as quirks, all of it painted a clearer picture of a pattern I could no longer deny. The realization was painful, but it was also freeing. I could see the truth now, unfiltered by hope or denial, and that clarity gave me a sense of purpose. I had to protect myself, and I had to protect my child. Hannah helped me research resources for abused spouses, connecting me with the local shelter, a legal aid hotline, and support groups for women in situations like mine. Each phone call, each conversation reinforced the reality that I was not alone and that options existed beyond the confines of our apartment, beyond the man who had hurt me. I felt a cautious hope begin to take root. I could leave, I could find safety, I could reclaim control over my life. The process was overwhelming, each step tinged with fear and uncertainty. But for the first time since I had discovered I was pregnant, I felt like I had a plan. Even in the quiet moments, when Hannah was at work or the apartment was still, I found myself replaying the slap over and over, the sharp sting, the betrayal, the disbelief. But slowly, the fear began to be accompanied by resolve. I was no longer the same woman who had been blindsided in our living room. I was stronger, more aware, and willing to fight for the life of my child and my own dignity. I began documenting everything, taking note of dates, incidents, and Daniel's behavior, preparing myself for the possibility of leaving and protecting myself legally. At night, I would place my hands on my stomach, whispering to the baby inside, promising protection, safety, and love. "I don't know what's coming," I would murmur, tears staining my pillow, "but I will do everything I can to keep you safe. We're going to be okay. I promise." The act of speaking to my child, of acknowledging the life growing within me, anchored me in a way nothing else could. It reminded me that I was not powerless, that I had the capacity to endure, and that I had a responsibility not just to myself, but to the tiny life depending on me to rise above fear and reclaim control. By the end of the week, I had taken the first tentative steps toward independence. I had secured a temporary safe space with Hannah, gathered essential documents, and reached out to legal resources for advice. The weight of the situation was still crushing at times, the fear still looming like a shadow over every decision. But it was tempered now by resolve and planning. I could leave, I could survive, I could protect my baby and myself. And though the journey ahead was uncertain, I felt a faint but undeniable flicker of hope, the first glimmer of light in the darkness Daniel had tried to impose. The days that followed were a delicate balancing act between fear and determination. Every movement I made, every conversation I had, was measured and calculated. I couldn't risk Daniel noticing anything, couldn't afford to let him catch even a flicker of my plans. I started with small steps, changing passwords, storing important documents in a hidden folder, quietly setting aside money I had saved from freelance work he didn't know about. It was exhausting, mentally and emotionally, to live with one foot in secrecy and the other in hope. But each precaution was a small victory, a shield I could hold between myself and the danger I knew Daniel still posed. I began reaching out more intentionally to the support networks. Hannah had helped me find the hotline staff were kind but firm, walking me through steps I needed to take to protect both myself and my unborn child. They explained my rights, the legal mechanisms available for restraining orders, and the procedures for emergency housing if Daniel tried to follow or intimidate me. Each conversation was both terrifying and empowering. I could feel a sense of agency slowly replacing the fear that had consumed me since the day he slapped me. Knowledge, I realized, was a weapon. The more I knew, the more control I could assert, even while keeping Daniel unaware of my intentions. Meanwhile, Daniel oscillated unpredictably between guilt, charm, and subtle threats, making the emotional terrain nearly impossible to navigate. One evening, he appeared at Hannah's apartment unannounced, a weak smile on his face, eyes darting nervously. "Lily, I've been thinking, I didn't mean what happened. Can we just talk?" he said, voice trembling slightly. I felt the familiar panic curl in my stomach, a visceral reminder of the slap and the betrayal it represented. But I had prepared for this. I met him at the door, standing tall, arms crossed, voice firm. "Daniel, I'm not going to have this conversation with you here, and I'm not going back. I'm staying here, where it's safe." His eyes widened, searching mine for weakness, but he found none. After he left, I sank into the couch, shaking from adrenaline, my hands clutching my stomach protectively. The emotional toll was immense. It was hard not to feel guilt for the anger, for the fear, for the small relief I had felt when he walked away. But then I reminded myself of the reason I was doing all this, the tiny life inside me, my baby, who deserved safety, love, and a mother who could protect them from harm. That thought, simple but potent, became my anchor, grounding me even as Daniel's unpredictable moods threatened to destabilize my resolve. I also began quietly preparing practical aspects of leaving. I found a lawyer who specialized in domestic abuse cases and made appointments to discuss custody and legal protections. I arranged for medical checkups at a clinic separate from Daniel's. Knowledge, ensuring that my prenatal care remained uninterrupted and secure. Every step required careful planning, a mental map of potential risks and safe routes. I became acutely aware of the smallest details, where Daniel kept spare keys, which friends might inadvertently share information, the timing of his work schedule. My life had become a delicate choreography of caution, but I embraced it, recognizing that each careful step was a brick in the foundation of my independence. Emotionally, the process was grueling. There were nights I cried until my pillow was soaked, nights I whispered apologies to my unborn child for the fear they would inevitably sense, nights I questioned whether I was strong enough to go through with it. But with every tear, with every whispered promise to keep my baby safe, I felt a quiet steel hardening within me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for this new life, and that responsibility made fear feel smaller, more manageable, and less overpowering. Daniel's attempts to manipulate my emotions grew more subtle and, in some ways, more insidious. He would send texts apologizing, sometimes claiming to have sought therapy, sometimes insisting he loved me, promising change. Each message was a temptation, a potential trap. But I had trained myself to respond with detachment. I would read the words, feel the faint sting of longing for the man I thought I knew, and then delete the messages without reply. It was painful, a constant tug-of-war between what I wanted and what I knew was necessary for survival. Each deleted text was a reaffirmation of my resolve, a tiny victory in reclaiming the life Daniel had tried to dominate. I also started rehearsing the moment I would finally leave, mapping every movement, every step, down to the minutiae. I imagined waking early, gathering my essentials, slipping out the door while Daniel slept, and heading straight to safety. I thought about the roads, the subway lines, the places I could hide if necessary. The exercise was exhausting mentally, but it brought clarity and confidence. I realized that leaving wasn't just about escape. It was about asserting control over my life in a way I hadn't allowed myself to do before. Through it all, I allowed myself small moments of hope. I read books about resilience, watched videos of survivors reclaiming their lives, and spent quiet hours imagining a future where my child and I were safe, happy, and free from fear. Those moments were brief but vital, reminders that life could be beautiful beyond the shadow Daniel cast. Each positive image of the future became a motivator, fueling the courage I needed to follow through with my plan. Finally, after weeks of careful preparation, I set a definitive date for my departure. It was still months before my baby was due, but I knew the longer I waited, the more danger I risked. I double-checked my bag, verified the contacts for the shelter and the lawyer, and confirmed Hannah's schedule so she could be ready to help. I went over every contingency repeatedly, ensuring that nothing was left to chance. It was exhausting, terrifying, but necessary. I had reached a point where indecision was no longer an option. Action was the only path forward. That night, lying in Hannah's spare bedroom, I placed my hands on my stomach and whispered softly, "We're going to be okay. I promise. I'll keep you safe, no matter what it takes." My words were a lifeline, a bond between mother and child, a vow that carried more weight than anything Daniel could ever wield. I felt a mixture of fear, anticipation, and a deep, unshakable determination. Tomorrow, I would take the first true step toward freedom. Tomorrow, we would leave the shadow of his anger behind. And in that moment, I finally allowed myself to believe that survival wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. The morning I left, I felt like my entire body was vibrating with tension and adrenaline. I had woken before Daniel, quietly gathering my carefully packed bag, checking and double-checking that I had everything essential: identification, documents, money, phone charger, and the small box of baby items I had purchased in secret. Each item I tucked into my bag felt like armor, a shield against the uncertainty of what awaited outside our apartment. My stomach fluttered nervously, not just from fear, but from anticipation and relief at finally taking action. Today, I was claiming a life that was truly mine and my baby's. The apartment was eerily quiet as I slipped on my coat and shoes, each step measured and careful. I avoided any creaking floorboards, any small noise that might wake Daniel and shatter the fragile security I had created. I placed my hand gently on my stomach, whispering, "We're leaving, and it's going to be okay. I promise." The words were a lifeline, a mantra I repeated under my breath as I eased the door open and stepped into the cool morning air. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange combination of fear and exhilaration: fear of what might happen if Daniel noticed, exhilaration at the thought of freedom and safety. The subway ride was tense. Every stop, every passerby seemed like a potential risk. I clutched my bag tightly, my other hand resting on my belly, feeling the subtle movements of the baby and taking comfort in them. Each step, each turn, each quiet breath was a reminder that I had planned for this, that I had prepared for every possibility, and that I was capable of carrying out my escape. I focused on the destination, Hannah's apartment, visualizing her waiting with open arms, ready to provide the shelter and support I would need to rebuild. When I arrived, Hannah was waiting, her face a mixture of relief and concern. She didn't ask questions, didn't scold or panic. She simply embraced me tightly, holding me as if she could absorb the tension and fear coursing through my body. "You're safe now," she whispered, and the words sank deep into me, finally allowing the tears I had been holding back to flow. I clung to her, my body shaking, feeling the exhaustion of weeks of careful planning and sleepless nights finally release. For the first time since the slap, I allowed myself to feel relief, though it was tempered by the lingering anxiety of what Daniel might do next. We spent the day unpacking my essentials, setting up a small corner of her apartment as my temporary sanctuary. Hannah had prepared a cot, fresh blankets, and a few items to make the space feel welcoming. I unpacked slowly, each item a small step toward reclaiming a sense of normalcy. The baby's tiny onesies and blankets, once hidden away, were now spread out carefully, a tangible reminder of what I was fighting for and what I needed to protect. Every small gesture, every deliberate action, was a reclaiming of autonomy and control I had been denied for so long. Daniel's reaction came sooner than I expected. By mid-afternoon, his calls began insistent and manipulative. He left messages that alternated between apologies, pleading, and subtle threats, all designed to wear me down. "Lily, I know I messed up. Let's talk. Please don't do this," he said on one voicemail, voice trembling but still tinged with control. On another, he was colder. "You think you can leave and I won't find you. Think carefully." Each message sent a ripple of fear through me, but I refused to respond. Hannah and I went over each call, documenting times, dates, and content, a strategy that gave me a sense of preparedness and authority over an unpredictable situation. That night, as I lay in the temporary sanctuary of her apartment, I felt the weight of the day settle into my chest. I thought of Daniel, his anger, his charm, his attempts to manipulate, and the fear that had once seemed insurmountable now felt manageable, tempered by planning and support. I held my stomach, feeling the subtle kicks of the baby, and whispered softly, "You're safe. We're safe. I won't let anything hurt us." The physical and emotional connection to my child grounded me, reminding me that the strength I needed was already inside me. Over the next few days, I began to rebuild the routines that Daniel had disrupted, small acts of reclaiming independence. I attended prenatal appointments in secrecy, coordinated with the lawyer for initial consultations, and began to think about the future with clarity I hadn't had before. Even simple tasks, like cooking a meal or folding laundry, became affirmations of normalcy, proof that life could continue outside the shadow of fear. I allowed myself brief moments of joy laughing with Hannah over old jokes, savoring a warm cup of tea, or reading a story to the baby while they moved gently inside me. Yet, the tension never fully left. Each noise outside the apartment made me jump. Each call from an unknown number tightened my chest. Daniel's reach, even from a distance, was a constant shadow. I learned to compartmentalize my fear, acknowledging it without letting it dominate my thoughts, and slowly, deliberately, I carved out spaces of peace and safety. I developed strategies, keeping phones on silent, changing routines, varying routes when I went out to ensure we remained secure. Every precaution, though exhausting, strengthened my confidence and resolve. Hannah became my anchor during this period. She listened patiently as I recounted moments with Daniel that I hadn't shared with anyone, helping me untangle the complex mix of fear, grief, and lingering attachment. We strategized together, ensuring that every step I took toward independence was calculated, safe, and aligned with the ultimate goal, a life where I and my child could thrive without fear. Her presence was a reminder that support could exist outside the toxic confines of an abusive relationship, and that love, when rooted in respect, could heal wounds Daniel had left raw. By the end of the week, I began to notice subtle shifts within myself. The tremor in my hands when I heard a sudden noise became less pronounced. The panic that had once consumed me when I saw Daniel's name on my phone dulled to a manageable awareness. I allowed myself to sleep more deeply, to laugh, to breathe, without the weight of anticipation pressing down on my chest. Each small victory, each moment of reclaimed calm, reinforced the truth I had been building toward, that life could exist without fear, and that I had the strength and support to ensure it remained that way. The escape had been terrifying, physically and emotionally exhausting, but it was also liberating in ways I had not anticipated. For the first time, I felt a measure of control over my life, a sense that I could shape my future rather than simply reacting to Daniel's moods and actions. I was tired, yes, but awake in a way I hadn't been for years, alert, aware, and determined. My child, small and fragile, yet resilient, had already begun teaching me lessons about courage, endurance, and the unbreakable bond between mother and child. And in the quiet of the night, after documenting Daniel's messages and securing our temporary home, I whispered one more time to the tiny life growing inside me, "We're going to be okay. I promise you, nothing is going to hurt us. Not him, not fear, not anything. You and I are safe, and I will never let anything take that away from us." For the first time, the fear that had defined weeks of my life began to dissipate, replaced with a fragile, luminous hope that no matter what came next, we would survive, and one day, we would thrive. The first few weeks after leaving Daniel were surreal. Life felt both unbearably heavy and strangely light. Heavy because the memories of his anger, the slap, and the fear he had instilled were never far from my mind. Light because I was no longer trapped in a cage I had thought was permanent. Hannah became my constant support, a living reminder that love and safety could exist outside of fear. She helped me navigate practical challenges, doctor's appointments, lawyer consultations, and the endless small logistics of survival. But more importantly, she reminded me that I was not alone and that I deserved peace. Every night, I would sit in the small living room, hands resting on my growing belly, speaking softly to the baby inside me. "You're safe now," I would whisper, tears sliding down my cheeks, a mixture of relief and lingering grief. "I promise, no one is going to hurt us. Not him, not fear, just you and me." Those moments became sacred, a ritual of bonding and reassurance, grounding me as much as they comforted my child. Each kick and flutter was a tiny reminder that life, even when fragile, was resilient. That resilience mirrored my own growing strength. I started attending a support group for survivors of domestic abuse. The first session was terrifying, walking into a room filled with strangers, sharing experiences that still felt raw and shameful, but it was also transformative. Listening to women who had survived similar horrors, who had endured fear and pain, yet emerged with courage and hope, gave me a sense of solidarity I had never experienced before. When I shared my story, voice trembling, tears freely flowing, I felt a weight lift. Speaking the truth aloud, acknowledging the abuse, and naming Daniel's actions for what they were, violence, control, betrayal, was liberating. It no longer had power over me. As the weeks passed, I began rebuilding my sense of independence. I found a small apartment within walking distance of my work and the prenatal clinic, a place where I could decorate, arrange, and inhabit space without fear. Every piece of furniture I carried in, every corner I personalized, felt like a declaration: this is mine. This is ours. No one can take it from me. I allowed myself to dream about the future, about raising a child in an environment filled with love, laughter, and safety, about rediscovering hobbies and friendships that Daniel had discouraged or dismissed, about existing fully in a life I had reclaimed for myself. Daniel's attempts to reach me dwindled over time, though I remained vigilant. Every missed call, every blocked text was a small victory, evidence that the boundaries I had established were working. I never sought revenge, never desired punishment, but I reveled in the freedom that came from refusing to be manipulated. I had realized that my power didn't come from retaliation, it came from living fully, safely, and authentically, despite what he had done. Every day I walked through that truth, reinforcing it within myself and for the child who depended entirely on my strength. The pregnancy progressed, and with it, a sense of profound purpose. I attended classes for expectant mothers, learned about prenatal care, and began preparing for the baby's arrival in earnest. I decorated the nursery with bright colors and soft textures, imagining the first moments I would cradle my child, feeling their warmth, their heartbeat, and knowing that I had created a safe haven from love and hope alone. The act of preparing, of envisioning a future without fear, became a meditation, a daily affirmation that the past could not define us. Through this journey, I also discovered depths of self-reliance I hadn't known existed. Grocery shopping, doctor visits, and managing work schedules while pregnant became exercises in quiet strength and careful planning. I reveled in the small freedoms I had once taken for granted, like walking down the street without flinching, opening my mailbox without anxiety, or cooking dinner without worry that Daniel would intervene or demean me. Every small act was a reclaiming of life, a declaration that abuse no longer dictated my days. Hannah remained my anchor through the emotional turbulence, but I also began to rebuild connections with other friends I had distanced from during my marriage. Coffee dates, walks in the park, and evenings spent talking late into the night reminded me that love, in its healthy, nurturing form, could exist again. These relationships were restorative, healing cracks left by Daniel's control, and helped me cultivate a support system that would sustain me and my child long after the pregnancy ended. As the due date approached, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety, natural for any expectant mother, but intensified by the history I carried. I allowed myself to imagine the birth, the first cry, the warmth and smallness of my child against my chest. I realized that this moment, once impossible to envision safely, was now within reach because I had acted, because I had survived, because I had refused to let fear dictate my choices. My child's existence was both a responsibility and a source of profound joy, a living testament to resilience, love, and the unshakable bond between mother and child. The day the baby arrived, I held them for the first time, heart swelling with a love so intense it was almost overwhelming. Tiny fingers curled around mine, and for the first time in years, I felt completely, undeniably safe. The hours of fear, the weeks of preparation, the long nights of crying and strategizing, they all culminated in this singular moment of pure triumph. I whispered softly, "We did it. We're safe. You're safe. And we'll be okay." The words were a promise, a vow, and a celebration of survival and victory over a past that had once threatened to define us. In the quiet moments of recovery, I allowed myself reflection. I thought about Daniel, about the choices he had made, about the life I had once hoped to share with him. I didn't feel anger in the same consuming way I once had. I felt clarity, a recognition that the past no longer controlled me. One had taken action, protected my child, reclaimed my life, and built a future defined by love, safety, and possibility. The scars remained, both physical and emotional, but they were badges of survival, reminders of the strength I had discovered within myself. As I settled into life with my baby, a fragile but radiant hope took root. Each morning, as I watched them sleep or felt the gentle flutter of tiny movements, I realized that the future was ours to shape. No one could touch the bond between us. No one could take away the love and security I had fought so hard to create. I was not just a survivor. I was a mother, a protector, a woman who had endured unimaginable fear and emerged with courage, resilience, and an unshakable sense of self. And so, in the quiet of our little home, as sunlight filtered through the curtains and my baby slept peacefully beside me, I whispered one last time, more to myself than anyone else, "We are safe. We are free. and nothing will ever take that away from us. The past, with all its pain and terror, had shaped me, but it no longer defined us. Our life, fragile yet strong, was ours to build, and for the first time, I felt the luminous, uncontainable possibility of hope stretching ahead, endless and bright.